You're listening to Channel Kindness Radio.
Hello, and welcome to Channel Kindness Radio. My name is Sophie, and I'm from Los Angeles, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm a member of the Born This Way Foundation's Youth Advisory Board, as well as a member of Mental Health America's Young Mental Health Leadership Council and the founder of the Youth Latinx Leadership Conference. I'm really excited to be joined today by my fellow Youth Advisory Board member, Khawla. Khawla, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, Sophie. Hi, everyone. My name is Khawla. I'm from Lebanon. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm an advocate for community well-being. It is lovely to join you here today, Sophie.
Thank you, Khawla. And this episode of Channel Kindness Radio is part of a series of interviews between members of the Born This Way Foundation's Youth Advisory Board. In our conversation today, we're going to be talking about different ways that we can build our communities. How can we create and support kind environments that help people flourish? So, Khawla, I know that you've shared a little bit with me about your work creating and being a part of participatory experiences of community health, like interventions. Would you like to kick us off by sharing some times that you've done this?
Yes, so maybe I can speak about my experience with A Space to Breathe, which is an intervention I did with the local schools in my hometown community in Baalbek. And basically, I would join teachers and the students at different times of the day for the different ages of the students. And we would bring some exercises during the day that will help them relax and rest, take deep breaths, and use different tools like storytelling, using Muppets, or using art and movement in different ways so that they could express themselves during the day, but also really create this collective space to breathe. So this is something that really stood out to me. I really enjoyed this experience, and I felt like it helped create this environment where students can share kindness with each other, they can share kindness with themselves, and also to have this positive interaction with the teachers. So what was really exciting for me in this is that I tried as much as possible to engage with the community. I didn't want to be the stranger that just walks into a classroom and starts talking to the children and tell them what to do and such. So what I did is sitting with the teachers in advance. We would find what are some existing resources they have, like the playground or a classroom, or maybe a music player or a projector, whatever they have, to really tailor all the resources they have in the school to these activities. And another thing was to exercise other ways of including the community. For example, I created some bean bags for the eyes that students can use as a tactile, sensory, like calming tool. So for that, I partnered with a local migrant tailor in the community who was able to prepare those, and also partnered with some social workers from the community who were able to share their exercises and activities. So those are just a few examples of ways that this activity brought in together many different people from the community.
That's beautiful, Khawla. I definitely love that idea of kind of incorporating a larger community to create a community for the kids. I think that the use of the migrant tailor and social workers, it's really a beautiful way to incorporate a larger community for one specific purpose, and that is to create a kind community for children. So that's very beautiful. I appreciate you sharing.
Thank you so much, Sophie. I'm very curious also to hear from you. How would you explain the connection between kindness, mental health, and community?
Yeah, so I think that all three of them are really kind of a triangle that lead into a cycle. So I think that kindness breeds better mental health, because when you practice being kind to others within your community, you're really practicing being kind to yourself. I think that self-compassion is very much linked to compassion towards others, and you can't really be as compassionate as you can to others without being compassionate towards yourself and without having that basis of self-care and self-love and self-appreciation. So how I've seen this manifest in my own personal work has been through the Youth Latinx Leadership Conference, which is just kind of like an interscholastic community of young Latino, Latina, and Latinx leaders who interact with each other and basically feed off of this power of role modelship and of cultural pride in order to provide better mental health for each other and for the community as a whole. So what I've learned is our conference really didn't start off as intending to talk about mental health. It was just intending to talk about leadership and opportunities and role modelship and interact with people like senators and politicians who kind of inspire the students in order to be able to learn, like, they can really make a career out of whatever they want to. They can really pursue their passions because there are people who look like them and who share their culture who have done so. And that's a very powerful idea. But in that, we kind of moved our conversation towards mental health and mental health stigma in minority communities. And that just kind of naturally happened from creating a safe space, from creating a kind space, and from creating a space where people just all have the same intention and all have the same passion and kindness. So I think that that's something very powerful, especially, when looking at recovery from different mental illnesses and mental health conditions. One can really feel that they're completely entrapped and that their identity kind of becomes secondary. They kind of lose their sense of humanity. And that's definitely something that I experienced with my own mental health challenges. I felt like it really became my entire personality. But only when I found other passions and other kind communities to involve myself with is when I really started to let go of that and feel like I had a community to love me and support me and to be a part of, and to kind of build my identity so I can start to let go of the things that were holding me back from being the kindest to myself that I possibly could be.
Thank you so much, Sophie, for being so generous and sharing your experience, but also in taking something that was so beneficial for you and creating a space where others can feel celebrated for their identity, affirmed. And this is really like what we're discussing here, the kindness and the bravery and this connection between identity and community and mental well-being. So thank you so much for sharing that.
I really appreciate your kind words, Khawla. And I think this is really what we need to be modeling. It's people supporting each other, people really building off that idea of kindness. And even though some communities might not totally intersect, they do intersect on the idea of kindness and the idea of supporting one another. So I know that you've received your master's degree and are definitely very interested around community mental health. So I'm wondering, what is it like to work with people firsthand while also you're studying, and how these practices work?
Yes, so for me, I really believe in learning through service and learning from experience as well. So I would love to share an image that comes to my mind immediately when I think of social solidarity and mental health and well-being. It was during an internship that I did with Kentucky Refugee Ministries, which is a resettlement agency in Louisville, Kentucky, that has at its core incredible values for welcoming the diverse newcomers community into Louisville, Kentucky specifically. So this space, at this time I was serving with the mental health coordinators there and the social workers. They had incredible activities that were having spaces for social solidarity and truly built those kind spaces for collective healing. Because as we know, many people go through different routes and different experiences during displacement from their countries of origin or countries of transit, or even arriving in the new countries. So some of those images that were so beautiful and so touching for me was, we had some drum circles, some hiking with the newcomers activities, art workshops, cooking activities. There was a choir group, I believe it was called the Singing for Unity, or I can't remember the exact word. It was they had different concerts as well. And these were very incredible spaces that went beyond the limitations of language differences and rather celebrated those differences as well. They found very creative methods for communication, those spaces that created moments of kindness for the self and for others, where you would sit and through the activity, you would kind of tell the other person, I see you, I hear you, I connect with you, I affirm what you've gone through, and I'm really happy and celebrating that you're here and that we're here together today. So those activities from KRM were definitely an incredible example of intentional kindness that can promote collective well-being. And I was very, very grateful to be part of those activities.
I think that's so beautiful and so touching, and especially how art and music, such as the drum circles and the choir, can really transcend the boundaries of language. Because I think that language and people who share the words that we speak is a very common way to build community. But it's important to remember that community can transcend that. It can transcend language. It can transcend differences. And it ultimately just means people who share something, and that something can be really anything. And I think that music is such a beautiful way to spark community. So really, thank you for sharing that. That's really important.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's really how it felt. It felt like I still remember those like sound vibrations in the air when you're doing the drum circle that really help you take a deep breath, look around, connect with people. You start looking at like people drumming with their hands, looking at the facial expressions changing throughout, and all these different ways to communicate that's beyond language. So thank you. And Sophie, I know that you also do some blogging work with Mental Health America, in addition to all the wonderful other things that we've mentioned here today. So why do you think it's so important for people to take in stories that represent who they are and where they are at?
Yeah. So just like we talked about how language can really create communities, I think that putting language to shared experiences where language hasn't necessarily been used before is a very powerful way to make people feel seen and heard and listened to. So a lot of people go through experiences that they don't really know how to fully express. And that's where things like music and art can come through. Someone can be going through a very hard time settling into a new country as a refugee. They could be dealing with a lot of trauma, and they can just pour that all into their music. But I think that another beautiful way to do that is through writing in whatever language it may be. And that's something that I found really powerful in my own recovery, and also bolstering other people's recovery, is encouraging people to write their story and share their story. And you don't really know if someone else is going to pick that up and read it and feel seen and heard in a way that they haven't felt before. And that's also a very powerful way to create mentorship and to create role modelship. Because what I found is that back when I was in high school, my English teacher was a very powerful role model and mentor for me, as she taught me how to use words to put language to stories that I had inside me but didn't really know about yet. So she really gave me that power, and I hope to pass that along to other people. And I think that that's why creative writing and storytelling is so important, as a way to not only build community, but also build understanding of what you're going through in a very powerful way that can speak to others.
That is definitely very powerful. And I think it's incredibly kind and brave of you to channel this gift that you have in creative writing to connect with others. And as you said, to put words and expressions to how people might be feeling. And that can really help sometimes understand ourselves and what the community is going through as well. So thank you so much, Sophie, for doing that and for being brave. Sophie, so I'm curious as well about your process of writing. I know some people might be very excited and interested to share their stories, but where could we start? Where could people start when they're sharing their stories, and what gets you in this creative mode, in a sense?
Yeah. So on the topic of creative writing, I think that there's a lot of power in the term an ugly, messy first draft. And I've really taken that to heart. I was taught by my English teacher that at the beginning of every session that I sit down to write, I should just pull out my notebook and just start writing for 5 minutes without putting my pencil down, and just let whatever comes out flow onto the page. And I think that's a very powerful way to kind of get your brain to lead you. So kind of the words just flow out without you doing much thinking. And it's very powerful. And for me, I find it very cathartic and very therapeutic, because it just shows how much power I have inside me. And as human beings, we all constantly have stories flowing around our heads. It's just a matter of getting it out onto the page, no matter how ugly it may be, no matter how messy it may be, no matter how messy this handwriting might be, no matter how much grammar it might have that is incorrect. It doesn't matter. It's just so powerful, that rawness of the stories that come out. So I think that's a very powerful way to begin sharing your story. And once you've done that, I think that for me, the most effective way that I write is through poetry. So I've really leaned into this idea that bending the bounds of language can help bend the bounds of society. So we can ultimately create societal change by creating linguistic change and like challenging linguistic structures in order to challenge societal structures. So for me, what that means, it's writing poems about mental health and about issues that might be considered taboo in many societies and many cultures. But that doesn't have to be super direct if you don't feel comfortable. It could be very creative. So the example that I always like to get to leave out there is the first poem that I've ever written. I think I was like 12 at the time. And I wrote about like this glass that was slowly emptying out. but it really had a lot of undertones of mental health. But the physical shape on the page was like a poem that slowly had less and less words in each line. So I think that those subliminal messages and being able to use your creativity in that way can be very powerful, a very powerful way to communicate what you're feeling in a way that hasn't been done before. So that for me was very powerful. And I know that we're running out of time and nearing the end, but Khawla, I would love to ask you a similar question. In terms of putting language to ideas and in terms of just social justice advocacy within communities. I know that you've talked to me a little bit about research that you've done through your master's degree and just research in general. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about that and what your research looked like and what the process was and what you've learned.
Thank you, Sophie. Yes, definitely. And I actually resonate a lot with what you said about the act of warming up those muscles. It's the same for me. I've taken some improv dance classes, and at the beginning I was feeling like very tight and not sure how to move and such, and then taking this few moments where you walk around the room and do anything. So I was really picturing those images while you were describing your poem, and I can definitely see that cup emptying, and I can picture very well what you described. So thank you for sharing this incredible advice with us for writing. And for research, so my research focus originally, because I did a bit of social behavioral health and community mental health research specifically. And one of the most exciting projects I worked on was a participatory action research project, which is a very fancy term to say that we don't come to the community with very specific questions. We come with tools, and we allow the community to reveal by itself what are the questions they have. And this is such a non-invasive type of research because, for example, thinking of the refugee population, they probably, even like a youth may have filled 100 surveys in 1 month, for example, if many people are coming and asking questions and exhausting and fatiguing the individuals. So we had a project that was focused on the mental health of displaced youth in Lebanon that were coming mainly from Syria and Iraq. And we used action theater, playback theater. Sorry, we used playback theater, and we basically used this space for people to express their stories, not necessarily coming and saying, what do you need and what have you gone through, but rather saying, what's your story? Let's talk about our stories together. So it was about collective storytelling. It was about advocacy through storytelling. And this was such a brave, definitely a very, very, very brave type of research. First of all, for the researchers coming in without anything, you don't know what the outcomes will be, but mostly for the people that were so brave in sharing their stories with us and in trusting this space and in creating this shared affirming space. So being there, listening to each other, supporting each other, sharing. So this is one type of research that I think it's very brave, and it's not, it wasn't very common. It was, I think, about 5 years ago. So we had to learn a lot throughout the process, but it also helped us learn a lot about the people that we're working with, which is the most important part of research for me.
That's very touching. I think that idea of coming into something blind and coming and not knowing what to expect, that is truly the definition of bravery. And when we talk about Born This Way Foundation's mission of creating kind and brave communities and empowering youth to be kind and brave, this is what we mean, that kindness creates bravery and bravery creates kindness. So that's so powerful. And I really appreciate you sharing that. And on the topic of kindness, I'd love for us to end by sharing one act of kindness that we're going to take today in order to end on a mindful note. So I can go first. I think that one kind act that I'm going to take is really focused on my self-care. I think that this week has been a lot of writing, a lot of work for me, and I want to take about 5 minutes to just meditate and sit there with my thoughts and be mindful. And then after, I want to do a free write like I told you about. I think that that's something I haven't done in a bit. And talking about it just like really made me remember how powerful and therapeutic it is for me. So how about you, Khawla?
That sounds lovely, Sophie. So the best thing I can do for myself is a good night of sleep because it's the end of the day where I'm at right now. But what I really enjoyed doing today is I live near the sea, so I had a little bit of a walk, and I got to go buy a few ingredients of one of my favorite dishes that is actually cooking as we speak. So very excited to have that. I really enjoy cooking, especially now that I work from home most of the days. I find that something that I wasn't able to do as much when I was a very, very busy student running around with my burrito between classes. So I really enjoy taking like the 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is in the middle of the day to create a meal and enjoy it with family. So thank you so much. And Sophie, this has truly, truly been such a wonderful conversation. And I'm really glad that we got to share some of our stories and learn from each other today. I would like to thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. And for all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. For more stories about kindness and bravery, you can go to channelkindness.org and follow us on social media at Channel Kindness. Thank you.
You're listening to Channel Kindness Radio.